Ah yes, a sus chord moving to a major triad. This chord is a 4-3 suspension, and honestly, everybody loves these. They're a kind of musical delayed gratification that's just so satisfying. Today we're going to look at two of the most common suspensions you'll find in Western music, the 1 chord and the 5 chord with 4-3 suspensions. There are lots of other types of suspensions, but these two in particular are everywhere, and if you're taking the AP Music Theory exam, you'll need to know them. And since all cadence types contain at least a 5 chord or a 1 chord or both, you'll frequently find suspensions at cadences. Let's start with just figuring out what we're working with, and then we'll look at the big picture. Let's start with what we just heard, a 5-4-3 suspension in the key of C major. The 5 chord is G major, so the second half of this is just a normal G major chord. But in the first half, there's a perfect fourth above the bass instead of a major third. That's what a sus chord is, a root, a perfect fourth, and a perfect fifth. In a 4-3 suspension, the voice on the fourth just steps down to the third while the other voices stay put. In a 5 chord, the 4-3 suspension is scale degrees 1 to 7. Here it's in the tenor, but it can be in any of the upper voices. The bass voice plus one other voice will be on the root, and the last voice will take the fifth. Here I've shown it sort of as one big chord, with one voice moving halfway through it. You'll also see it as what looks like two separate chords, like this. Both of these work the same way. So, in isolation, that's all this is, sort of a two-part chord. And for a 1-4-3 suspension, it will work exactly the same way using the tonic chord of C major. Two roots, 1/5, and one voice executing the 4-3 suspension, this time on scale degrees 4 to 3. Okay, now that we've zoomed in on the suspension itself, let's look at the bigger picture. Why is this thing called a suspension? It starts with the previous chord. We have a chord, here it's a 1 chord, and all of the voices move to a different chord, a 5 chord, except for one voice, which holds on to the previous note, suspending it into the next one. Then, to fix it, the voice that's suspended steps down to a note that is in the 5 chord. So we have 3 specific steps here. First, the preparation, when we have a chord tone that's going to hold into the next chord. Then the suspension itself, when the other voices change and make that suspended note dissonant. And finally, the resolution, when the suspended note steps down to a note in the chord. And there's another important component here, rhythm. The suspension itself will always be on a stronger beat than the resolution. Suspensions put the dissonance right there front and center, usually on the downbeat, not hidden in the texture somewhere. The result is a beautiful moment of controlled tension and release. And by the way, the tie from the preparation into the suspension is optional. You'll see these both tied and not tied, and when there's no tie, we call it a rearticulated suspension. Now, the preparation step limits which chords can come before the suspension. The note to be suspended must be in the chord of preparation. So, which chords can lead into a 5-4-3 suspension? Well, the note that's a fourth above the bass is scale degree 1, so that means the chord before it must contain scale degree 1. We have lots of options. 1 or 1/6, 4 or 4/6, the 6 chord, inversions of 2/7, and when you get into more advanced harmony, inversions of 5/7/5, 7/7/5, and augmented 6 chords are all options as well. Let's just look at 2 examples. They all work the same way. Let's start with a 1 chord, use voice exchange to get to 1/6, then move into our suspension before finishing up with an authentic cadence. In this example, the 1/6 chord has 2 voices on scale degree 1, the soprano and the tenor. Either one of them, but not both, can do the suspension. I chose to put it in the soprano, where it'll be the most obvious. Let's hear it again with the voice leading highlighted. Now let's see a minor key example, starting on 1, moving to 4/6, creating a Phrygian half cadence with a suspension, then ending it all with an authentic cadence. Again, 2 of the voices are on scale degree 1 in the 4/6 chord, the alto and the tenor. Here they're on a unison, so the alto must go up and the tenor must go down. Suspensions always go down, so the tenor gets the suspension. Sounds pretty good, huh? 5 chords get suspensions added to them a lot because the chords that come before 5 frequently contain scale degree 1. Now let's look at a 1-4-3 suspension. A fourth above scale degree 1 is 4, so in order to have a 1-4-3 suspension, the chord before it must contain scale degree 4. This could be an inversion of 4, 5-7, where the chordal 7th becomes the suspension, or 7-7, which is more common in minor keys. Technically, this could also be some sort of 2 chord, but in the common practice period, 2 rarely goes to 1. Let's look at an example with a plagal cadence. Let's do a simple 1-5-1 in a minor key, follow it with a plagal cadence, and end with a suspension into the final 1 chord. Great, that one's pretty straightforward. The root of the 4 chord is scale degree 4, and in a plagal cadence, the voice on 4 already normally goes to 3. So we're just delaying that motion and turning it into a suspension. Here it is again with the voice leading highlighted. Now let's lead into a 1-4-3 suspension with a 5-7 chord at an authentic cadence. But remember my video about the 5-7 chord and how when moving from 5-7 to 1, the required resolutions lead us to either having an incomplete 5-7 and a complete 1, or the opposite? The same is still true with the suspension here. Using a complete 5-7 chord, we'll end up with 3 roots in the 1 chord and 1 voice executing the 4-3 suspension. If we want a 5th in the 1 chord, then we need to leave the 5th out of the 5-7 chord, like this. Both work, but personally, I like hearing the 5th clash against the 4th in the suspension, so I usually prefer the second method. Now, let's look at a common mistake. If you recall from my video about 5-8-7, that big scary line connecting the 2 numbers looks confusing, but it's actually telling you something very important. One voice, and only one voice, is moving from one number to the other, a 4th above the bass to a 3rd above the bass. This is important because, remember, that 4th is temporarily displacing the 3rd. We're never using a 4th and a 3rd at the same time on top of each other. And this is the common mistake I see students make. Writing a complete triad with a root, 3rd, and 5th, and then adding a 4-3 suspension on top of that. It sounds like this. And that is not the effect we're going for. The chord also doesn't make sense. Instead of a sus chord, it's an add 4 chord, which is barely a thing, especially in classical music. The 3rd is wrong here. Change it to another root. So, just remember, exactly one voice is going to execute the 4-3 suspension, and then the remaining voices are only roots or 5ths. So, quick recap. 4-3 suspensions are triads where the 3rd of the chord is temporarily displaced by the 4th, which was held over from a previous chord before resolving to the 3rd. And seriously, these are some of the most satisfying progressions in traditional harmony. Do you have any favorite examples? Drop them in the comments. And stay tuned for the next episode where we'll see how turning a 5-4-3 suspension into a sort of double suspension creates another cornerstone of Western harmony, the cadential 6-4 chord. See you next time on Dr. Fromm's Music Lab.